welcome our PSI National Training Director and Project Director of the National Sports Summit 2021 to give his welcome message. Can we all welcome Sir Mark Edward Velasco? Magandang hapon, sir.
Thank you, Joash. To all our participants who has been with us since the beginning, we are on our 13th session. And lucky number 13, we have a very special speaker for today. He's a respected sports leader, a decorated lawyer, a university lecturer, and a very good government official. Uh, I hope you enjoyed this afternoon session as we welcome in our lecture today is attorney Alberto Agra. And once again, thank you for supporting the Philippine Sports Commission in this National Sports Summit. Once again, welcome and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you po, Sir Mark Edward Velasco. And totoo po yan. Salamat po for joining us all these 13 sessions. And we are very happy po na kayo po ay nandito with our familiar faces and new faces as well, I think, sa ating pong participants. This time, can we also welcome, last but definitely not the least, to deliver his inspirational message on behalf of the PSC board, can we all welcome PSC Commissioner Charles Maxey. Magandang hapon po, Kom.
Una sa lahat, first of all, the Philippine Sports Commission Board of Commissioners, led by our chairman, William Boots Ramirez, always recognize the support of our stakeholders in any activity that we implement, any program that we do here in the Philippine Sports Commission. And we always know for the fact that we cannot succeed without the support of our stakeholders. So maraming salamat sa suporta ninyo palagi, even during this time of pandemic. You are always there to support our program, participating, taking part as we craft as we chart our journey for sporting excellence. And the programs of the Philippine Sports Commission will not be complete without the participation of our stakeholders. And gaya ng sinabi ni Mark at saka ni Joas, this is ang continuing program and getting exciting each session. We are now on session 13, and we have prepared a top-notch speakers for you, for the participants, and hopefully we can have a good program that will be consultative, not only from the Philippine Sports Commission's point of view, but for our stakeholders in charting our course. And the topic this afternoon, sports legislation, is also important. And we have covered many fields in sporting since we started this National Sports Summit. And I think each one of us are really intent on having a successful program, not only for the Philippines, for the country in general, but also in our localities. I understand we have participants from the local government units, from different sports associations, sports groups, stakeholders. So we are looking forward to have a good relationship with you, good collaboration, and hopefully this afternoon's activity will bear fruit and will impart on you the added knowledge, especially on sports legislation, as we have a top-notch expert in the field, in the person of Attorney Alberto Agra. So again, I'm happy that you're still there despite this problem, and together we will rise above this challenge that we are facing today by continuing our education in the field of sports. Good afternoon, everyone.
Maraming salamat po, PSC Commissioner Charles Maxey. Tama po kayo doon, Kom. Just want to reiterate ang statement po na binigay ng ating Commissioner na patuloy po tayo, continuing education, and tayo po on our different sectors of the community ay gathering pa rin, patuloy pa rin nagkasakasama sa National Sports Summit 2021. Alam niyo po, today's session is one of the many lectures we will be having for the first phase of the NSS. As said earlier, these sports conversations would be presided over by recognized figures from the local to the international sports scene to deliver short lectures in the online conference format. Afterwards, an open forum will be facilitated to gather insights and views as a synthesis for every session. And we would also like to acknowledge the presence of our acting executive director, Attorney Guillermo Iroy, who's also with us. Attorney, alam ko po nandyan kayo, and we want to greet you. Good afternoon po. And right now we move forward, no, to our ano ba yung pag-uusapan natin ngayong hapon na ito. Sports law in the Philippines defines the scope and breadth of sports law in the Philippines. What is sports law? What is sports, and what is its purpose, and what are its aspects? Ang ating pong presentation today will cover constitutional policies on sports law, government and governance, partnership in sports and classes, rights and responsibilities of athletes such as on safe sport benefits, injuries, and anti-doping. The resource person will also present a template agreement between a national federation and an athlete, and many more ang ibabahagi po sa atin ng ating guest speaker. Ang ating pong guest speaker for today is a decorated lawyer and sports leader. He heads the Obstacle Sports Federation, Asia Pacific and East Asia and Southeast Asia Free Running Parkour Union. He is the vice president of the Asia Free Running Parkour Union and the deputy chef de mission for the Philippine contingent bound for the 2021 Vietnam Southeast Asian Games. Our guest speaker also chairs the arbitration committee and serves as a member of the Constitutional Amendments Committee of the Philippine Olympic Committee. Besting worlds, he is also a public servant, a law professor, a bar reviewer, a law book author, and an athlete. He is currently the chairman of the governing board of the Philippine Reclamation Authority and was the former acting secretary of Justice, acting solicitor general, and government corporate counsel. He teaches and has authorized law books and policy papers on administrative law, local government law, election law, law on public officers, and law on public-private partnerships. He competes with his age group in obstacle course racing and javelin throwing. Publications under his name are an infographic on sports for a purpose, anti-gender-based harassment in sports, the role of sports in achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and our national athletes, employees, independent contractors, service provider, or beneficiaries of their national sports associations, sports for a purpose at the local government level, PPPs in sports, and National Federation Athletes Agreement. Help me in welcoming our guest speaker for session 13, Attorney Alberto Agra. Magandang hapon po, Attorney.
Magandang hapon, Joash. Parang kinakabahan ka sa ginagawa mong moderate ngayong hapon. I was joking, Joash, na I will be grading him. So that's a joke. And again, good afternoon to everybody. Joash, can I already share my screen?
Yes po, Attorney.
Thank you. So again, good afternoon to everyone. Maraming salamat sa Philippine Sports Commission, Chairman Butch, to Commissioner Maxi, no, kay kaibigang Mark at Attorney Iroy, and of course to those who invited me and who thought of this topic. Maraming salamat. No? So again, good afternoon to my fellow public servants, my fellow sports advocates, my fellow teachers, and my fellow learners or students. Kanina binanggit ni Joash that mahalaga ang continuing learning. By the way, for purposes of our forum this afternoon, mahalaga din bukod sa learning, ang unlearning and relearning. It's a continuous process. And masaya ako na I think we have more than 500 participants. No? It clearly shows na napakalawak at napakalalim ng komunidad sa sports at maraming gustong mag-aral tungkol sa sports, no? And again, welcome to and thank you also to my fellow Olympists. That might be a new term for everybody. I will be discussing what Olympism is, how do we differentiate an Olympist from an Olympian. Mamaya I will explain that shortly. While we will be talking about a legal topic, I promise everyone that this conversation will be light, will be relevant, will be interesting, and will be popularized. Earlier, binanggit ni Joash na I'll be asking everyone, hopefully I will ask for your indulgence. Kindly participate. Mamaya, use your icons in the chat for simple yes and no answers. I mean, just to check that you're listening and you're awake. So, and mamaya, we will have a question and answer forum. And please, we will welcome your feedback and comments and your questions. Because as explained by the Philippine Sports Commission, there will be clear takeaways from this learning, unlearning, and relearning sessions. So what is the topic assigned to me? It's about sports law. And this will be the flow of my short, maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes discussion. I will cover 4 topics. What is the meaning of sports? What is the meaning of sports law? Then I'll give you a survey of what are the relevant sports laws in the Philippines. Then a bulk of my presentation will be talking about specific areas of sports law. And lastly, I will cap my presentation with my own advocacy of sports for a purpose. So let me begin with a definition of 2 terms. So my first question to everybody is there a technical, legal definition of sports? So you can please, let's start the yes and no in our chat box. Meron bang technical o legal na pagkahulugan ang sports? No? Or is that term so common that you don't have to define it? Because for us lawyers and for us students, mahalaga na mayroong definition of a particular term so that when we use that term, there will be no ambiguity or any misinterpretation. So, again, thank you to PSC, no, because of this forum. Dumaan din ako sa learning process, no. And based on my research, there is no statutory or definition under any of our cases, Supreme Court decided cases, on the meaning of sport. I suppose it's so basic, it's so common that there's no need to define this common term. No? But when currently I'm going through a 1-month course on how sports can contribute to sports and development, no? I've encountered this definition. So if you look at this definition, it's a very broad definition and a non-legalist definition of what sport is. One, it's not just about physical exertion. It talks about physical fitness. It talks about mental well-being. And it also talks about social interaction. So hindi lang siya physical. There are 3 dimensions to sports. Number 2, it doesn't only talk about traditional sports or Olympic sports. It talks about any activity. It talks about whether organized or not organized, whether recreational or competitive. And if you look at the last part of the definition, it even talks about indigenous sports. So napakalawak ng definition. If you look at the bottom, in one of the primers that I publish, because I'm trying to advocate sports for a purpose for local government units, here is my proposed definition of sports, which local government units can adapt. It talks about physical exertion and skill. It can be individual or team event. And again, the objective or the purpose of sports, according to this definition, is to become better, to develop, to compete against another, or to interact with others. No? Siguro if I were to compare my definition to the definition which I just learned from Future Learn, no? I will amend my own definition to include mental well-being and social interaction so that I will be consistent with the United Nations Interagency Task Force on Sport for Development and Peace. So again, hopefully our legislators or even our policymakers, even at the local government level, will adopt officially a definition on what sport is. Okay? The next term I will define will be what is sports law. And again, sa ating mga batas sa Pilipinas, sa ating mga Supreme Court cases sa Pilipinas, wala ring definition or kahulugan ang sports law. No? So here I have two sources of definition of sports law. One, it talks about law includes mga batas, mga regulasyon, mga desisyon ng korte, and patukoy siya sa sports or yung activity at mga atleta. It's not just one piece of legislation. It talks about an amalgam of laws, and therefore napakaraming batas. At mamaya po ang aking next slide, ipapakita ko yung napakaraming batas tungkol sa sports dito sa Pilipinas. To look to your right, the right column, it talks about sports law being a practice, sports law being a special or a particular industry, like entertainment law, like arts law, like media law. Marami kasing tinatawag na sa ibang bansa boutique laws, no? Yung mga highly specialized practice on law. No? So here, sports law talks about a target industry. What is that industry? The sports industry. And meron bang layunin ang sports? Or maglaro lang tayo, yun na yung sports. No? If you look at this, what I researched on by the Rider University, merong malalim, merong noble, merong malawak na purpose ang sports. And mamaya po papakita ko na marami sigurong hindi nakakaalam na malalim din ang purpose o layunin o misyon ng sports dito sa Pilipinas ayon sa ating saligang batas. So if you look at the sports law under this Rider University, ang layunin ng sports law is for safety, equality, fairness, and integrity. Hindi lang while you're competing or in the field of play. Even outside of the field of play, mahalaga ang sports law. At ano ang mga aspeto? What are the aspects of sports law? It talks about the Constitution. I will share with you the provisions in our 1987 Constitution touching on sports law. Maghahalaga din po ang kontrata ng mga atleta sa kanilang liga, no? Kontrata ng mga atleta sa kanilang gym, kontrata ng mga atleta sa kanilang national federations. In the States, napakadami ng mga sports agents. And in the States, yung mga sports agents which need not be lawyers must register in their respective states. No? We have a lot of movies on sports agents. Jerry Maguire is one such movie. Torts, nagkaroon ng aksidente, merong namatay sa isang sports event, merong napilayan. Ano ang accountability ng organizers of those races? So we will cover torts and crimes. Question, ang mga atleta ba empleyado? Ang mga atleta ba kliyente? Ang mga atleta ba independent contractors? Ang mga atleta ba beneficiaries? I will answer those questions shortly. Another important aspect of sports law is trademark. Pwede ba nating gamitin ng isang akda, ang isang logo, ang isang brand, ang isang kanta, no? Para sa sports? Pwede bang buwisan ang mga premyo ng ating mga national athletes? Are there competitive mechanisms on sports law. And lastly, which I will underscore later, how do we protect our athletes and even our coaches and even our officials from forms of abuse and discrimination? So these are the aspects of sports law. Okay. Now we will have a survey of sports laws. No, actually, when I was preparing for this webinar, I realized that there are laws which I have not encountered, and I'm again thankful to the Philippine Sports Commission for giving me this opportunity to learn more about this field of practice. So let me now show you what are these sports laws. But before that, let me walk you through the provision in our 1987 Constitution about sports law. Again, ang sports, hindi lang pang sports. Ang sports, hindi lang para magpapawis. Okay? If you look at to your left, this is the Declaration of Principles under our 1987 Philippine Constitution. Para saan ang sports? It says here, sports to foster patriotism, nationalism, pagmamahal sa sariling bayan, social progress, and total human liberation and development. Very powerful words. Sports is not just for sports' sake. And gusto kong palakpakan ang Philippine Sports Commission because for undertaking this summit, clearly it shows that the Philippine Sports Commission operates and lives for a purpose. And if you look to the right, these are some of the components of sports in the Philippines. Amateur sports, professional sports, international sports. Again, there is a purpose for all these activities. Self-discipline, teamwork, excellence. For what? Development of a healthy and alert citizenry para sa buong bansa, para sa lahat ng komunidad. Mahalaga po, ito ang ating nasa basic law in the Philippines, in our Constitution, and therefore lahat po ng ginagawa ng Philippine Sports Commission, lahat ng ginagawa ng Games and Amusement Board, lahat po ng ginagawa ng all other agencies involved in sports here in the Philippines must pursue this advocacy. Ito po, one of the exciting slides and for me, eye-opener. Napakarami pong batas in the Philippines involving sports. To my left, to our left, would be what are the general laws affecting sports and affecting everyone for that matter. One, we need to study the charters of the administrative agencies. Isa pong mahalagang charter or enabling law na kailangan natin pag-aralan, ano ba ang mandato ng Philippine Sports Commission? Ano ba ang mga kapangyarihan ng Philippine Sports Commission? Ano ba ang kanyang mga responsibilidad? Ano ba ang kanyang structure or balangkas? Again, that's in Republic Act 6847 because the Philippine Sports Commission is an administrative agency. DepEd is also another administrative agency. So if you look at RA 9155 and if you look at RA the 1987 Administrative Code, all of these laws tell us about the responsibilities, the breadth of the powers of administrative agencies. Bakit relevant ang Republic Act 7160 or the 1991 Local Government Code sa usapin ng sports? Because all programs of the state, including sports, fitness, well-being, kasama po ang ating kapartner natin, ang mga local government units. And in fact, as I will explain shortly, I'm advocating that all local government units in the Philippines adopt their own sports for a purpose ordinance. Revised Corporation Code, why is that relevant for sports law? Because there are in the private sector, the private sector companies or private citizens, they form their own corporations, whether profit or non-profit, under the Revised Corporation Code. For example, the Philippine Olympic Committee is a private entity. It is registered under the Corporation Code. Civil Code, bakit mahalaga? For damages. Revised Penal Code for certain infractions. And please, let me highlight also, mahalaga po ang safe space. sa larangan ng sports. Ano yung tinatawag na safe space? Bawal ang bullying, bawal ang harassment, bawal ang discrimination sa spaces. And when we talk about spaces, in the offices, in the field of play, during training, these are safe spaces. What are the sports-specific laws or legislation? We all know, noong 2019, and hopefully, marami pang magkakaroon ng biyaya sa darating na Tokyo at Southeast Asian Games in Vietnam, because nadoble na po ang benefits under RA 9064. Ngayon po, under RA 10699, 2015 po, marami pong incentives at benefits ang ating mga coaches at ang ating mga atleta. Number 2, ito po, I will admit that I only encountered this law yesterday when I was updating my PowerPoint presentation, the Athletic Programs Report Act, which I have dedicated one slide for this. Mamaya po papaliwanag ko. Meron tayong bagong school, High School for Sports. No? This was enacted into law in 2020, the National Academy of Sports. Hopefully, kasabay ng ibang mga state colleges and universities, it will open for face-to-face classes this year. There is one law which recognizes a particular sport, which is our National Martial Arts and Sport, and this is ARNIS. For professional sports like boxing and basketball and even volleyball, there we have another administrative agency, the Games and Amusement Board. Earlier, I mentioned that the Philippine Olympic Committee is a private entity. However, in 2 pieces of legislation, the POC is recognized by law. In the National Athletes and Coaches Benefits Act, mentioned po ang Philippine Olympic Committee, and in the Athletic Programs Report Act, mentioned po ang ating Philippine Olympic Committee at ang ating mga national sports associations. So napakarami po ng ating kailangan pag-aralan if you want to be immersed and involved in sports law. Okay. Specific areas of sports law, and in this part of my lecture, I will be discussing some of the sports laws in the Philippines which are relevant to these areas of sports law. Let me begin with government and governance. Okay? When we talk about government, we talk about national government agencies. We talk about local government units. We talk about government instrumentalities, government-owned and controlled corporations. And part of the government bureaucracy is we talk about state universities and colleges. But let me just highlight 2 of the administrative agencies involved in sports. One, our organizer and host for today's summit, the Philippine Sports Commission, and another one, the Games and Amusement Board. The other side of the spectrum would be private entities. We have the Philippine Olympic Committee for our able-bodied athletes, and for our para-athletes, we have the Philippine Paralympic Committee or the PhilSPADA. We have national sports associations. I currently head the NSA or National Federation on Obstacle Sports. We have schools, we have leagues, we have gyms, and we have private clubs. So we talk about government and governance. And by the way, government and the private sector, government and government, private and private can enter into PPPs. So what's the first P? It could be private or public. The second P could be also public and private, while the third P talks about the partnership. I looked at the third topic from my topic. It will talk about public-private partnership. Napakahalaga po ito. Binanggit kanina ni Commissioner Maxi na mahalaga po ang pagtutulungan. Mahalaga po ang partnership. The Philippine Sports Commission cannot do and accomplish its mandate on its own. And that's the very reason why we're having this series of consultations and conversations, which is very, very laudable. And again, for these three, public-public, private-private, and public-private, each of these will be governed by different sets of laws. So which kailangan natin mapag-aralan in the future. Earlier, I mentioned that one of my new advocacies would be to localize sports for a purpose. I'm currently promoting, and hopefully for the local government officials who are here with us, hopefully you will be able to convince your local councils and your mayors, governors, punong barangay, or even regional governor to adopt their own sports for a purpose ordinance. And again, I'll share with you the link where you can download this template or draft ordinance. In this ordinance, it talks about what is sports. Number 2, protection against harassment and discrimination. Number 3, having an objective that at least half of the residents, the constituents of that local government unit to be engaged in sports. How can we accomplish through sports the 17 Sustainable Development Goals? Having a plan, having competitions, rewarding or giving incentives to our leagues, gyms, and associations, creating a sports for a purpose council, creating or establishing a fund, coming out with partnerships in sports, and lastly, penalizing any form of harassment or discrimination. These are the salient features of this draft or sample or template local ordinance. We recently formed an association of community sports advocates. Majority of the members of this association are local elective or local appointed officials. To our friends here who are public servants of their respective local government units, if you want to join this association, AXA, please let me know. This is another way of networking and in being involved in partnerships for sports. Classes of athletes, a very interesting topic. When we talk about athletes, there are various forms of athletes. We have national athletes of our national sports associations. We have student athletes of our colleges, high school, members of the varsity team. We have professional athletes, basketball, volleyball, and boxing. We have recreational athletes, and we have members of clubs who are club athletes. Question, are they beneficiaries? Are they employees? Are they contractors? Are they clients? Or are they members? I will answer in a bit my own take of what would be the status of national athletes who are national athletes of our national sports associations. Are they employees? Iba po ang requirements pag kayo'y empleyado. Sila ba ay kliyente? Sila ba ay beneficiaries? I will answer that shortly. And again, for all of this, when we talk about relationships and the classes and the status of these athletes, there are different laws which would govern the status. Let me just show this, and I will not discuss this extensively. No? Mahalaga po na ang mga atleta, alam nila, alam natin ang ating mga karapatan at ang ating mga responsibilidad. The International Olympic Committee came out with this list of 12 rights of athletes against discrimination, transparency and fairness, information, opportunity to generate income, gender representation, athletes representation, reporting unethical behavior, privacy, freedom of expression, and due process. Mahalaga po ito para sa mga atleta. And again, right now we don't have a law on this, but all of these are captured in my draft ordinance for local government units. Hopefully, PSC, absent a law, can come out with the list of rights of athletes. Mahalaga po, hindi lang naman puro karapatan. It's not one way. It's never one-sided. If athletes have certain rights, they also have certain responsibilities. And our International Olympic Committee also came out with a list of 10 responsibilities. Being clean, reporting, following national laws, Olympic values. No? Being a role model. No? Mahalaga po yan. No? Being active in our organizations. Ito po ang mga responsibilities of our athletes. Safe space. Earlier, I mentioned about one of the components of sports. No to harassment, no to bullying, no to discrimination. And we have a law in the Philippines against all of these, including sports. We have the Bawal Bastos law or the Safe Space Act. So in all competitions, sa lahat ng training, sa lahat ng opisina ng ating mga sports offices, whether government or private, kailangan po pangalagaan ang safe sport. So again, there are penalties. Pwede ka pong makulong. Kung ikaw ay nanghaharas, kung ikaw ay nagdi-discriminate, kung ikaw ay nagbubuli sa larangan ng sports. So it's good to read this law and to understand the repercussions of violating and complying with this newly enacted law. Okay. Let's talk about the Athletic Programs Report Act, a very new law. No? And again, thank you to PSC. No? I realized that there is such a law. Who are covered to make the report? Who must make the report under this law? One, colleges. Who had their athletic programs approved by the Commission on Higher Education. So ito po ang covered under this law. Ano po ang kailangan nilang i-report? Hopefully the colleges who are represented in this forum know this law. And again, if you don't, please be reminded of this law because there are certain responsibilities of these colleges who must report annually to the CHED. Number one, ano ba ang ratio ng male and female athletes in your colleges for your sports? Number two, ano ang ratio ng male and female coaches in your college athletic programs? And lastly, in terms of scholarship in your respective colleges, what is the ratio of male and female? And therefore, if we were to read the reason or the very purpose or policy behind this law, it is to promote gender equality. Because for a fact, as we all know, there is gender inequality existing. So this law is one such law which attempts to promote gender equality in athletic programs in colleges. My latest primer is about a draft or a sample or a template agreement between an athlete and a national federation. Here, I highlighted just 9 aspects of this draft. Number one, what is the status of these athletes? Earlier, I mentioned, it is my belief, it is my advocacy that national athletes, elite athletes of NSAs and national federations are not employees, but are beneficiaries of the national federation. Why are they beneficiaries? Because they represent the country, not just the NSA, they not just themselves, not just their families, but the whole nation. Right to consent. In my template agreement, can an athlete be forced to be inoculated or vaccinated sa COVID vaccine? In my draft template, my answer is no. An athlete cannot be forced or cannot be compelled and therefore cannot be penalized for not getting vaccinated. So that is my take. An athlete can withdraw from the team anytime, or at least in my draft template, wag naman the day of the competition, but at least 3 months prior to the competition, that athlete has the freedom to withdraw. Exclusivity. An athlete cannot join another NSA belonging to the same sport. An athlete must follow the anti-doping rules. No? An athlete must be clean. Conversely, the National Federation has the right to terminate, but there are certain grounds in my draft agreement to ensure na hindi naman whimsical or arbitrary or walang dahilan ang pag-terminate ng pagiging national athlete ng isang atleta. Maliwanag din sa aking draft agreement na kailangan bawat NSA ang magkaroon ng implementable, doable, safe sport policies. Maliwanag din sa aking draft template na kailangan ng National Federation ay merong resources na ibibigay nila sa kanilang atleta. Allowance, competition expenses, coaches, among other things. And lastly, kailangan ang National Federation ay merong individualized training plan per athlete. And in the crafting of that training plan, kailangan po consulted ang national athlete. Again, bahagi ito ng participation and co-ownership of the athlete over his or her own welfare and well-being. Again, this is a draft template which I'm trying to advocate to the NSAs and to the athletes. One of the responsibilities of an athlete would be clean living. We have updated na po ang World Anti-Doping Code. No? This can be downloaded in the website of WADA. And on the other hand, mahalaga din po na lalo na po sa ating mga organizers of races, organizers of events. So kung kayo ay pabaya, if you're reckless, kung wala kayong safety measures in the organization of these races, you can be held liable kahit na meron pang waiver for injuries and even death. So please, no, that's another aspect of sports law on torts, and in certain cases that there could be crimes when in sports events and sports activities. Benefits of our national athletes. Again, meron pong roster of national athletes which is being supported by the Philippine Sports Commission. And this list nanggagaling po sa mga NSAs which are recognized by the Philippine Olympic Committee. There are certain benefits. Number two, kung ikaw ay mag-perform sa Olympics, no, this coming July, Asian Games and regional games such as the SEA Games this coming November in Vietnam. No? Depende sa iyong performance kung ikaw ay gold, silver, or bronze medalist. And depende whether able-bodied or para-athlete. By the way, under our current law, kalahati lang po ang makukuha ng para-athlete. My own advocacy, sana po mabago ang ating batas, no? Republic Act 10699. At ang aking pangarap or ang aking advocacy, wala po sanang pagkakaiba ang benepisyo ng able-bodied at para-athlete. No? That's my own advocacy. But right now, the para-athlete gets only half of what an able athlete gets. And by contract, pwede pong magkaroon ng ibang benefits and incentives ang ating mga atleta. No? Allowance, compensation, stipends, travel accommodations, training, and their own personal competition gear. And let me end my lecture on sports for a purpose. Earlier, I mentioned that sports has a noble purpose. Meron siyang malalim na layunin. No? And again, yung malalim na layunin na to ay even captured in our 1987 Constitution sa mandate po ng ating Philippine Sports Commission. Let me share with you my infographic on sports for a purpose. The journey is equally important than standing in the podium. The Sustainable Development Goals are also important, not just the winning a medal on the part of an athlete. Leadership is important. No, happiness is important. The field of play is not just confined to the field of play, the formal field of play, but even outside, particularly in relation to safe sport. Mahalaga hindi lang yung ating mga elite athletes. Mahalaga lahat ng atleta, recreational athletes, school athletes, club athletes, mahalaga. And let me underscore at the bottom of this infographic would be the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I firmly believe, and I would like to invite everyone that for all our sports activities to go beyond the podium. They must be, sports can be a potent vehicle, and this has been proven in the past all over the world. Then the sports can be a vehicle for peace, for human rights, and for development. Lastly, if you want to get a copy of these primers which I have developed so far, I have crafted and published 6. No, just visit my website, and you can download all of these primers. And I will be publishing this month my 7th primer. So pakiabangan na lang po. No? So we have Safe Space, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, National Athletes as Beneficiaries, how do we localize sports law with local government units, the 3 levels of PPPs, and lastly, National Athletes as Beneficiaries. And some announcement. No, I just cleared this earlier because of this passion and inspiration which has been brought about by this webinar. I suggested to the Philippine Sports Commission that we will hopefully, after this webinar, I'll be drafting the proposed design. We will be offering an online certificate course on sports law. It will definitely go deeper into our discussion. What I gave today or this afternoon will be an overview of sports law. Mas palalalim pa po natin ang sports law. And again, this is not just open to lawyers. This is open to everybody in sports. So, because we're all students in sports. So again, abangan ang announcement ng Philippine Sports Commission and Philippine Sports Institute regarding this online course on sports law. And let me end my lecture before we proceed with the open forum on earlier. I said, welcome to my fellow Olympists, because for me, the true essence or the true north of Olympism is not the games, but building better humans. We are here to build better humans, to build active communities. And I'd like to invite everyone, while only a few of us can become Olympians, we are all called to become Olympists. And let me end by, lahat tayo dumadaan sa crisis ngayon, lahat tayo nasa pandemic, but we are all challenged and even called to thrive. Not just to survive, but to thrive. And therefore, let me end my lecture in this word for the day, advertunity. Let's harness our adversities. Let us capitalize on our adversities and create opportunities. So if you want to download my primers, please visit my website. It's my full name, albertociagra.com, and you can download all the primers and for free. And with the permission of the Philippine Sports Commission, I will upload this PowerPoint presentation in my website so that everybody could get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So I will now stop sharing, and let's now open the floor to the Q&A.
All right, thank you. Maraming salamat po to our guest speaker, Attorney Alberto Agra. Kung nagustuhan niyo po 'yon, if you've been natuwa po kayo and marami po kayo natutunan, pwede ba natin bigyan ng virtual round of applause si Attorney? Alam ko our participants now are naka-on cam. So can we give a virtual round of applause? Maraming salamat po. Before we move to our open forum, allow me to give you a recap. Sana po, Attorney, kahanin ko po. Pero I'll give you a short recap for everyone's information on what is yung sports legislation in the Philippines as shared by our guest speaker. Sinimulan po ng ating guest speaker ang kanyang lecture with the definition of sport, and as shared by our speaker, may 3 pong dimension ang sports. Ito po ay physical fitness, mental well-being, and social interaction. At hindi po, I think it plays complementary sa isa't isa, Attorney, and hindi po lang nakarely sa physical natin na activity that we're doing, but also our mental well-being. Lalo na po ngayon, most of our athletes and even our mga sports enthusiasts we're all experiencing the same pandemic, and kaya mahalagang dimension po yun ng sports that involves our mental well-being and social interaction. As defined by our guest speaker, sports is an activity involving physical exertion and skill, which includes an individual or team competing against each other. So yun po ang kanyang konsepto. And how about sports law? Ano naman po yung sports law? As said earlier, sports law refers to a specialized practice focused on legal issues po, no, pertaining to the sports industry. Katulad po ng mga iba-ibang industriya sa bansa, ang sports ay mayroon din pong sariling structure and industry. And merong mga laws, as mentioned by Attorney Agra, na nag-a-apply to a certain practice. That being said, sa sports po yun. And meron tayong mga highly specialized laws na binanggit ang ating guest speaker kanina that involves our sports industry. Unahin ko na doon, just a short mention, yung ating National Athletes and Coaches Benefits Act. Meron tayong, as mentioned kanina, na Athletic Programs Report na shinare sa atin ni Attorney. Also, ang ating National Academy of Sports Act, and I think our Executive Director, Professor Joy, is here joining us as well. Hello po, Professor. And specialized sports law is also present for our earnees as a national martial art and sport. Meron po tayo niyan. And again, the law also recognizes not just the PSC by virtue of the Republic Act 6847, but also the Games and Amusement Board, also handling yung sa professional sports, and also the recognition of the Philippine Olympic Committee. I just want to reiterate ang sinabi po na ating guest speaker that sports has a purpose. Ultimately, the role of sports law is to ensure safety, equality, fairness, and integrity of athletic competition on and off the playing field. Minention po ng ating guest speaker kanina na hindi po natatapos yung kapangyarihan po ng batas as well as yung implementation ng batas, hindi lang po on the court but also off the court. Mahalaga pong nating tandaan yan. And meron din pong mga aspects, no, ang mga sports law kung saan it also involves our constitution, yung mga kontrata po ng mga athletes, a sports agency, yung mga crimes and injuries, and labor, and yung trademark, yung paggamit ng sports to different trademarks, taxed, and ang hinighlight po ng ating speaker, no, discrimination and safe sport. And sa 1987 Constitution po, sinabi po dito that on Article 14, Section 19, the state shall promote physical education and encourage sports programs, league competitions, and amateur sports, including training for international competitions, to foster self-discipline, teamwork, and excellence. So talagang hindi po hiwa-hiwalay yung mga sports laws natin na independently ano po sila, no, parang intertwined po yung mga batas natin dito. That also I like what our speaker said, no, sport is not just for sport's sake. Hindi po tayo naglalaro para lang maglaro. Siguro kung tayo po ay mga bata, yun lang po yung noon, yun lang po yung sole purpose natin, but as it evolves specifically sa elite sports on our elite athletes, it's more than just that. Maganda pong na-highlight po yun ng ating speaker. And also just want to reiterate ang pinagkaiba po ng government and governance. Ang PSC po and ang Games and Amusement Board ay ang mga national government agencies that work together with our local government units, mga GOCCs, and also we also have POC and PPC for the private company. And I just want to summarize that up, no. Meron pa rin pong binanggit ang ating speaker about safe sport and safe spaces. And lastly, he mentioned po na sports has a noble purpose. Malalim po ang layunin ng sports and ang mandato po ng Philippine Sports Commission. And we are called to thrive, not to strive, even we are facing pandemic. Maraming salamat po to our guest speaker, Attorney Alberto Agra. Attorney.
I also have another request from our participants. No? For those who are interested to enroll in that online course on sports law, no? Please show your hands, thumbs up, para lang the Philippine Sports Commission can have some sense, and including myself, if you're interested to enroll. No?
Ayun na po, no? Ang dami na pong hands, Attorney.
Kung umabot tayo ng 2,000 rate, no, wala naman tayong 2,000 ngayon. And again, we will do this soon, very soon, and announce this very soon. So, marami bang nagtaas ng kamay?
Yes po. As of the moment, may 60 plus at natabunan na po ako sa screen sa dami po na nag-raise hands. Maraming salamat po for really participating. That being said, please take this time.
Kahit dalawa lang naman ang mag-enroll, masaya na tayo doon. So, but the more the merrier. Thank you.
Yes po. We can start na po dahil may mga participants na po tayo na nag-send in ng kanilang mga katanungan. Unahin po natin, attorney, first question from Amil Kabatuan from DepEd Region 11. Sabi niya po, Incentives Act, only national coaches lang po ba ang nagkakaroon ng benefits? Pwede rin po bang magkaroon ng benefits ang mga local coaches? Kung pwede po, papaano? Salamat po.
Yeah. Again, unfortunately, very limited ang scope ng batas na ito. No? It covers dun sa sasali lang sa Olympics or Asian Games or regional games. No? And it involves also the coaches who trained the national athletes who won the medals. No? So right now, limited ang application, but hopefully in the future, at the national level or even at the local level, yung mga local coaches natin can be recognized. So again, wag natin iasa lahat sa national government. No? I'm a firm believer in local autonomy. No? Kaya sana mga local government units natin, through their ordinances, will provide for incentives for local athletes and local coaches.
All right. Attorney, I just want to take this time po to relay po yung good comment po ng ating isang head from the PSC, si Ma'am Queenie Evangelista. Hello, ma'am. Sabi niyo po, mas maganda po na hindi lang po National Federation and Athletes Agreement. Baka po, I think we could also include the PSC, National Federation, and Athletes Agreement po.
Sige. And again, if we can have a forum on this, no? Kasi that's a draft. I would really welcome comments on this. It can be a tripartite agreement. So again, kailangan din maliwanag if ever it's tripartite. Kasi in the draft, the template that I have, nakaspell out yung rights and responsibilities of athletes and the National Federation. If it's going to be tripartite, then mahalaga din kasama ang Philippine Sports Commission.
All right. Sabi po ni Sir Francis Nemenzo from Palawan Provincial Sports Office. Good afternoon, Attorney Agra. I'm a member of your association sa ACSA. Someone is asking me how to become a new member of the association. How can they join? Thank you.
Yeah. Earlier, I sent my, yung sa last slide. You can email me. I'll send the form to whoever's interested. We have a very simple form to apply. And we welcome members. No? Again, ang layunin nito ay palawakin ang advocacy ng sports for a purpose everywhere in the country through communities and local government units.
All right.
Thank you.
This one's a good question from Jerlu Flores from UP Diliman. Meron po kasing COVID vaccine program yung school para sa mga coaches. Yung mga coaches po ba na ayaw magpabakuna ay hindi ba sila mape-penalize dahil sa kadahilan lang hindi nila gusto or choice yung magpabakuna na available as of the moment? Karapatan ba nila yon, attorney? Go ahead po.
Ganito, no? Yung nakalagay sa aking draft template agreement, no? Which again, wala pang pumipirma kasi wala pang nag-a-adopt. I firmly believe na ang mga atleta and even the coaches have the right to consent. Ang tanong is, assuming wala, kasi ang covered ng template na yon ay NSAs tsaka national athletes. Ang tanong, what about in a local government or in a school system? No? Meron ba silang ganong karapatan? No? Again, my own thinking on the matter, kasi I'd like to apply the right to consent to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Pwede bang puwersahin ang kahit sino na magkaroon ng vaccine? I think hindi pwede. Kalayaan nila yon, umoo or hindi. Kailangan lang ang aking pakiusap before you make any decision, you will be informed. Mahalaga, maraming seminars, maraming infographics about the vaccine. I'm a firm believer na kailangan vaccinated lahat. Pero again, I'm also a firm believer na hindi pwedeng puwersahin ang kahit sino na magkaroon ng vaccine. And pero sana ang desisyon na yon nagmumula dahil sa kaalaman, hindi dahil sa text, hindi dahil sa chismis, hindi dahil sa fake news, pero galing sa tama, reliable information.
All right. That's clear po, and I hope na sagot po yun ni attorney. Next question po from Reynaldo Reyes, isa sa mga participants po natin that's actively participating. Attorney Agra, I would like to ask you this question. Is there already an implementing rules and regulations for the RA 10699? And second question po niya, is there any law or provision of law protecting the tenure of athletes and coaches, even the fact that NSAs have the sole authority to determine the plantilla of athletes and coaches?
Sige. Number one, implementing rules. I'm assuming yes, but I have not read it. Kasi like any other law, normally what follows would be the implementing rules. I'm assuming there is, but let me check on that. Number two, ano nga yun, Joash?
Sabi po niya ay, is there any law or provision of law protecting the tenure of athletes and coaches?
I'm not aware of any such law. Kaya nga, I'm strongly advocating that NSAs and their athletes enter into agreements. I'm also strongly advocating na sana yung mga professional athletes meron ding kontrata. Alam ko sa basketball meron silang template. Mahalaga kasi may kontrata para maliwanag. Alam mo ang hangganan ng iyong karapatan at hangganan ng iyong responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So how I wish everybody will adopt their own agreements so that everything will be clear, hopefully not subject to any interpretation, so that all the rights, including tenure, will be made clear. No? Right now, I'm not aware, and I might be wrong, I'm not aware of any NSA in the Philippines na mayroong standard contract for their athletes. No? What we have for my federation, meron kaming undertaking and commitment, which basically captures the agreement. Pero we're still in the process of forming our national team. And soon, we will enter into agreements with them para again maliwanag, Joash.
All right. Hope that's clear. This question po is from our one of our PSI coordinators sa Bicol region, si Sir James Nunez. Some LGUs are not giving priorities in sports development, but they gain recognition in DILG award-giving bodies like Seal of Good Governance. Can sports development programs be included in the criteria for the Seal of Good Governance, Attorney?
My answer is sana, no? Kasi maraming alam nyo hindi nakakaunawa kung ano ba ang impact ng sports. No? I sincerely believe that sports is a part of socio-economic, political, for me, sustainable and integrated development at the local government level should include sports. So maybe we should try to talk to DILG to include sports development as part of the criterion for Seal of Good Governance. And maybe DILG and some other government agency could award local governments for their own initiatives on sports and sports for a purpose. No? Maybe PSC can do that. No? So again, hopefully, magkaroon tayo ng expansive and purposive view of sports. No? Again, sports is not just for sports.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Ito naman po, another question from Jose Dennis Peñalosa from LGU San Carlos City, Negros Occidental. What's the process of localizing new sports disciplines under LGUs?
Again, mahalaga, I'm advocating sana meron silang ordinance on sports for a purpose, which you can download in my website. Like any other local government activity or initiative, kailangan may buy-in ang buong balangkas ng local government unit, the local chief executive, the council, the vice mayor, the department heads. Meron tayong sistema ng local development councils under our local government code. Kaya in my template, I'm proposing the creation of a sports for a purpose council. Multi-stakeholder, multi-duty bearer structure to talk about sports and development. So that is my proposal.
All right. Ito naman po from Marvin Miranda from Department of Education. I am working with young para-athletes. What are the legal duties of our local government in terms of providing support aside from DepEd?
Again, sorry if I'm going back to that sports for a purpose ordinance kasi that will capture not just able-bodied athletes. that will cover everybody. No? Let me just highlight Sustainable Development Goal number 3 talks about health, no? Which includes inclusivity. No? Dapat ang sports hindi pang elitista lamang. No? Ang sports hindi lang pang elite athletes. Kailangan kasama ang kabataan, kasama ang mga may edad katulad ko. No? Dapat kasama ang able-bodied, kasama ang para-athletes, kasama ang kababaihan, at kasama ang LGBTIQ. So I'm a firm believer in true inclusion, true inclusivity.
All right. That being said, Prof, I'll go on with that thought po. No? Sabi ni Jose Gabriel Berinya from FEU. Hi, attorney. What is your opinion on the issue of transgenders participating in men or women's sports? Is it considered legal? Thank you po.
Unfortunately, we don't have a clear-cut policy here about that. No? PSC may come out, DepEd may come out with a policy. There could be a law regarding this. But I'm an advocate of inclusion. Kaya in our federation, we have a strong diversity committee, and full support to everybody who wants to be in sport. And everybody should be in sport, no exception.
It's a good.
And again, they should be treated fairly. No, hindi second class, third class, fourth class athletes. No, everybody should be in one class.
So,
yes.
All right. Also, I think yung dami pong questions po, no, attorney, that we are thankful sa mga participants po natin for actively participating. I'm just scrolling through their mga questions po nila. And
again, lahat ito pag-uusapan natin doon sa sports law certificate. Papalalimin natin yung discussion on all of this. And thank you for noting down these questions because that could be part of our course syllabus.
All right. From our media friend po na present here, attorney, from Sir Paulo Barcelon from CNN Philippines. Sabi po niya, you mentioned that athletes should not be forced to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Should an athlete choose not to be inoculated? Or what forms of support should the NSAPSC give to ensure their protection against COVID-19?
Again, how I wish all athletes would get vaccinated, all coaches. But that's my desire, that's my advocacy. But we cannot force them. Ang magiging downside lang is what if the organizer of the event, let's say Southeast Asian Games, will require all their athletes, no? All athletes before they can be accepted in their country must be vaccinated. Then baka mag-iba ang paradigm because it's a requirement by the organizers. It's not a requirement by the NF or the NSA, but if it's imposed by the organizers, then baka hindi ka maka-compete if you're not vaccinated. No? Let me just highlight the Tokyo Olympics. No? To this very day, it is not required. It is highly encouraged, but it is not compulsory. It is not mandatory. It is not required. I agree with that policy, no? Because IOC is a firm believer in the right to consent. And magkakaroon ng ibang problema if it becomes mandatory on the part of IOC to require vaccinations. Because there are napakalakas ng Athletes Commission ng IOC, and this is one of those rights which the Athletes Commission of IOC and all Athletes Commissions for that matter, including here in the Philippines, to protect and to assert that right to consent.
Good point po. Move on naman po tayo to another topic. Sabi ni Sir Mark Joy Credo from CAR State University. Any thoughts po on game fixing and how can we prevent this?
Again, maliwanag sa konsepto ng sports not to manipulate competitions. It must be fair. But ang tanong is, what if in the Philippines nagkaroon yun? Are there penalties? What are the guidelines? Maybe it's high time for us to clarify those policies. It can be part of the contract, no? And again, in my draft contract, that's a requirement, no? Clean living and clean sports. So kailangan lang maliwanag yung penalties if it's graduated or Kailangan mo ba ibalik yung allowances? No, kailangan maliwanag. Depende kung anong offense, tsaka kung ano yung penalty. Actually, in my future primers, I will talk about manipulation in sports, anti-competition in sports, and even corruption in sports.
Magandang topic po yan to delve into.
Yes.
Ito po, attorney, I think this question is para po at least magkaroon po ng kalinawan. Sabi po ni Chris Bangkal, sabi po niya, indicated po sa Bill of Rights of Athletes is the right to participate in sports regardless of ability or levels. Then how come some sports associations would not permit an athlete if he or she are not members of the association?
Again, how I wish lahat ng NSAs have the same set of policies, have the same set of guidelines. By the way, in the Philippine Olympic Committee, which I'm part of, the POC respects the autonomy of the NSAs. No? And if there are issues within the NSA, no? Meaning intra-NSA issues, this can be a proper subject of arbitration within the Philippine Olympic Committee. No? So are there standard policies governing all NSAs? Not right now, because again, while there are certain policies under the Philippine Olympic Committee charter, malaki ang paggalang at respeto ng Philippine Olympic Committee sa kalayaan ng NSAs.
Good point po. Siguro din po maganda rin pong balikan po no yung mga sinabi po ni attorney about differences of the PSC, the POC and the NSAs para at least mas klaro po sa atin 'yon. And from Detalia Visviminda, how would be university athletes ano po ang mga rights ng ating university athletes for them to be protected? Do they have the right to complain to any anomalies like allowances po not being released and so forth?
Alam mo, with or without a contract between, let's say, the school and the athletes, maliwanag naman sa karapatan ng kahit sino, no? Yung freedom of expression. No? Maraming ways by which you can seek redress and get relief. No? Ang mahalaga nga, sana meron ding standard agreement between a school and their student athletes. So maybe that's one of the things that we can start drafting. I've drafted already NSA and athletes. Maybe we can come out with a template or a guide agreement between a school and a student athlete. Ang tanong nga is, ano ba ang status ng student athlete? Empleyado ba siya? Kliyente ba siya? Beneficiary ba siya? Contractor ba siya? Yun ang magandang tanong na kailangan masagot.
All right. And I think we have to end on this question po.
Sure.
For our final questions. All right. From Michael Tolentino from UMAC. Pinapatupad na po ba yung Magna Carta for Student Athletes as authored by our Senator Pia Cayetano?
Like any other statute, kailangan ipatupad, no? Pero alam naman natin hindi lahat ng batas ay nasusunod sa lahat ng aspeto niya, no? So dapat ipatupad, but if there's any violation or infraction, there are certain penalties for not following, whether administrative, civil, or criminal. So mahalaga. Again, let me also include that, no, yung Magna Carta in the survey of laws, no. Again, marami rin ako natutunan mula sa inyo sa mga and this is it's a process. It's a never-ending learning process.
All right. That being said, that concludes our open forum for this session. Thank you very much, Attorney Agra, for a very cohesive open forum and synthesis also. As you know, we are really bound by time restrictions, but we know everyone po dito has a lot of questions pa rin po that are yet to be answered. Kaya po, huwag po kayong mag-alala. Yes, go ahead po.
Sorry, can I post in my website the copy of my PowerPoint, or is that okay? Or you let me know if that's okay?
We'll let you know, sir. But I think with all liberty, sir, I think okay naman po for your materials. So
Sige.
may mga nag-participants din po tayo right now that are inquiring if they can
And again,
have a copy.
ang mahalaga sa akin sa learning yung materials eh. So
Yes po. Sa inyo po yan, sir, as said by our team right now po.
yeah.
And
Actually,
also, may kung gusto rin pong balikan ng mga participants natin, ang episode po natin or sessions natin ay uploaded po sa PSC YouTube channel. So if wala po kayo opportunity to get the copy of Attorney Aguilar's presentation, you can go back to our YouTube channel po.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, Joe. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes po. And as said po, no, the mga questions po that will not be answered will be turned over to our data processing. Wala pong data that will be wasted and everything will be turned over to research. We will now take this time to honor and award the Certificate of Appreciation to our 13th speaker for Sports Conversations. And to award the certificate, can we all welcome our Acting Executive Director, Attorney Guillermo Eroy. Attorney, magandang hapon po. I'll give you a few moments po, Attorney, to say something before our awarding. Go ahead po, Attorney.
Okay. Thank you to our speaker, who is an authority in law, Attorney Alagra. Sir, thank you. Thank you very much. Not only a national lecturer, but also an international speaker in sports law in particular. So thank you very much, sir. And also to our participants, do we have okay? Because I hope, sir, you will accept our small token,
Of course.
this certificate of appreciation presented to our speaker, Attorney Alberto Agra, for your invaluable contributions as our resource speaker for sports legislation in the Philippines, session to sports conversations, the first phase of the National Sports Summit, 12 May 2021, signed by our chairman, William I. Ramirez. Sir, thank you very much. Hopefully, we could also send you our plaque of appreciation soon. And also for our incoming program between the PEC as a partnership with the obstacle course and your office. So we will look forward into that. And I think there are too many who would like to attend already. So we will optimistic that it will push through in the coming months.
Thank you, Attorney Eroy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po again at our Acting Executive Director, Attorney Guillermo Eroy, and our guest speaker.